The irony of it all is that the examples of the revolutionary, quote unquote, revolutionary state that these examples that people always point to, they came off of unprecedented militant organization that does not exist here at all.
Right.
Not just that. In the case of the USSR, it was spontaneous democratic self-organization amongst peasants and labor that the Bolsheviks took advantage of to leverage for statecraft. They couldn't have done statecraft without that shit going on first.
Right.
That's the irony of it, right? So now you have a generation of all these multiple generations of young people that they're getting into these ideas and these concepts and these mythologies in some cases. I should have used scare quotes over getting into, because they don't understand the nuances or know about the nuances of this history. But they're starting it off with like, with the chaos and the breakdown comes the opportunity for all of this stuff. And it's like all of this stuff, quote unquote, that you're pointing at in every scenario had a certain level of militant organization that we are not even relatively close to in this country right now.
Yeah. That's the thing that pisses me off. Like, just to insert this, the fucking consumer activism shit, because it's just like, we're doing this on top of what?
Right.
On top of what organization or infrastructure are we doing any of this? Is it an ecosystem of likes on social media? Is that literally all it is? And that's somehow going to be some kind of awareness that you would hope gets picked up into a mainstream story on major networks, and then it shifts the dialogue, and somehow that affects legislation. Is this what we're doing?
Right.
And that is it? Because that seems like that's it.
I guess some of us are just about that life, dog.
What are you about to catch them all?
No,
people really feel that themselves. They really feel themselves on that tip, though.
No, that shit is real.
It's just shrunken imagination.
Right.
It's like
and catharsis.
Well, they think because they could personally beat up Joe Biden that the rest is taken care of. Like I could fuck up Joe Biden if I wanted to. If I wanted to.
Yeah.
It's important to note that I'm not going to, but I could. It wouldn't even be close.
Joe Biden, I feel like you could kick one of his limbs off like an Army of Darkness zombie. Like, it would just clean come off.
Oh,
and
his
dust would fly off.
I feel like his legs would just snap off like one of those zombies that's just like on his like arms and knees, on his elbows.
He'd be a crawler at the end of a Black Ops zombie.
Oh yeah, he's done.
But see, I think it goes hand in hand. This emphasis on power that we constantly have, and being able to acknowledge the power dynamics, the reality of the power dynamics that we're currently living under too. And I think it makes sense that people who have these authoritarian personalities or mindsets, it's not factored really into the equation in a concrete and practical way, because their desire for control over other people is that strong.
Right.
It's like, I need that now,
Right.
Figures like Lenin were genius in the sense that they were politicians. They were great at manipulating scenarios and situations in order to then get that control and that power.
I was less impressed by Lenin than I expected to be. He was, of course, a great man. He seemed to me a reincarnation of Cromwell, with exactly the same limitations that Cromwell had. Absolute orthodoxy. He thought a proposition could be proved by quoting a text in Marx. And he was quite incapable of supposing that there could be anything in Marx that wasn't right. And that struck me as rather limited. I disliked one other thing about him, which was his great readiness to stir up hatred. I put certain questions to him to see what his answer would be, and one of them was, you profess to be establishing socialism. But as far as the countryside is concerned, you seem to me to be establishing peasant proprietorship, which is a very different thing from agricultural socialism. And he said, oh, dear me, no, we're not establishing peasant proprietorship. He said, you see, there are poor peasants and rich peasants, and we stirred up the poor peasants against the rich peasants, and they soon hanged them to the nearest tree. Ha, 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 ha. I didn't much like that.
I've read a good amount of Lenin. I'm just laughing thinking about why he was took shit about Lenin, man. You know, the common narrative. It's a mythology. What I'm about to say is it's a mythology. It's left folklore, right?
Yeah.
That Lenin, he had good intentions, but this is like the critical folklore about Lenin, like the positively critical interpretation of
critical
Lenin.
Support.
Yeah. Right, critical support of, he had these certain expectations, and he had these certain intentions, and they weren't like Stalin though. It wasn't like Stalin was. Stalin was the guy. If Lenin had
the bad cop.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. If Lenin had stayed alive, that shit wouldn't have gone down like that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have gone down like that.
If I was on that plane.
But the thing that's interesting is if you read Lenin, and especially early Lenin, before he was even like late 1800s, before he was even known. He said what? Before he got signed. He expressed this proclivity towards. It was you could perceive it as elitism. He was like he was an elitist. He was an accelerationist. Like he believed that there needed to be immense suffering. There needed to be immense collapse and suffering and toil to sort of awaken the, stimulate the anger of the people that in reality, that's the energy he could take advantage of as an orator, especially. He was a brilliant speaker for these political aims.
But you have to understand that if Lenin had stayed alive, then we would have leaned in to communism. We would have leaned in. Stalin came along and he stalled the process. You have to understand these are the roots of these words.
Lending a hand to each other.
We're not lending a hand to
the whole point I'm making with this is to actually paint a picture of how bleak it actually is in some of these people's mindsets, because they don't even have that. They don't even have what he had to get that statist result.
Right.
They don't even have that. It's just this, and I think you gave the accurate context in calling it consumer activism, because I think that's at the root of it. It's just coffee talk. It's just like coffee table, whatever, wishful thinking and delusion, maybe in the worst of cases, or occults actually in the worst of cases, because that's a thing.
I think
it's a longer conversation, obviously, especially USSR history. There's lots of shades and whatever.
I'm sure everyone's gonna really be chill with what we're talking about.
Right. I'm gonna have to just cut this whole thing out.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's
we're not.
No. But like for the 30th time, it's like,
oh wait,
it's all.
Last
Go
thing,
ahead,
because I want to give people always ask for recommendations. Look into Gavril Myasnikov if you're interested in USSR history and the dynamics within the Bolshevik Party and Lenin specifically. That's a figure you want to look into. Yeah. There's more figures, but I'll just leave it at him because he's one of my favorites. Yeah. He was a Bolshevik, but yes.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say for the 30th time, just like it's all based on just like a deferral of political power. That's just so ground into our psyche at this point that we're just this delayed gratification that we get from the electoral process. Right. I mean, things like Social Security, all these things that it's somewhere down the line we're just gonna automatically have a better life, as long as we keep plugging away. And
someone's gonna do something.
Somebody's gonna do something. Somebody's gonna come along and save us. And it's all just ultimately grounded in powerlessness. And this and is powerless and like a tacit awareness that the shit you're talking about is never coming. Like you never have to back up what you're saying. You know?
Right.
There's
always an excuse.
Yeah, exactly. It's scientific socialism. You just have to keep trying it, and it gets a little bit closer every time. Even though it doesn't for all the people that died on the way to get to where you are this time around. You know, I wouldn't even call it scientific socialism. I'm using their words. This is me using their words.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
because scientific implies critical inspection,
science.
Yeah, critical inspection and interrogation, and then
it's weird science.
Yeah, changing weird science.
Yes, the weird science.
No, but like, you think we and this is science not claimed by capital, right? It's like we'll change the form. We change the formula because this isn't working. Like this isn't getting this outcome that we're claiming it's supposed to get. So we change the form. That's not what's happening here. This is like mythology and tradition and all of those other things that you mentioned. Right. And it's also important to say a majority of people don't even fucking they don't even know about it to that degree. They're not even necessarily that conscious and aware around that level of intentionality. The broader nationalism stuff, even like certain things in organized religion and the hierarchies there and patriarchy, like, and white supremacy, these really broad sort of social systems of domination are what I feel like dovetail to create the circumstances that these fascists or proto-fascists would want to take advantage of, essentially. That's where I feel like we should be looking. That's where we should be facing, like, with these conversations. It's just like unpacking.
Say it again, I think.
Yeah.